afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Stock Market Today for Monday, March 17th, St. Patrick's Day. It's Alissa Coram here, and we did see a lot of green on the screen today, but mostly overseas. We're seeing the pots of gold out there, as it were. Joining me now to discuss today's market action is my colleague, Justin Nielsen. Justin, we're both in green. We got the memo today.
Yes,
Looks like so did the market. What do you have for us today?
Yeah, so we will kind of look at a good old-fashioned Irish company, PDD, formerly known as Pinduoduo, so I say Irish.
Sounds so Irish.
Right, exactly. But then we'll also take a look at Berkshire Hathaway because he's been making some purchases overseas as well. And then we'll also end with Tradeweb, which has been doing a lot of global action itself.
All right, well, we'll take a look at those stocks, but first, we need to analyze the major indexes. So, as I mentioned, green on the screen today, the Nasdaq up 0.3%, the S&P 500 up a little bit more than 0.6% in today's session, rather. The Dow up almost 0.9% on the day is what I'm seeing after the closing bell, and then the Russell 2000 headed into the close, slightly delayed here. We saw a gain of 1.3%. So, in terms of the major indexes, the NASDAQ, its rally attempt continues, but we are still waiting for more of a definitive signal of a change in the overall market trend.
Yeah, it was certainly not the kind of strength that you want to see. I am encouraged that we got above Monday's high. That was kind of an area that I was looking at. Next stop, I think, is 18,000, getting above that area. But we did close in about the 58% closing range. We were up as much as, almost a full percent earlier in the session. So it's not a great close. And what's interesting, though, is if you compare this to QQEW, which is the Q's an equal weighted look at that. Look at the strength there. So whenever I see a divergence like this between the equal weighted and our market cap weighted, the first thing I do is I look at FNGS, and FNGS, yeah, that's kind of a weak look. So there was definitely a lot of strength elsewhere. It's interesting because one of the things I was looking at is XLK, right? Because a lot of times you think of XLK, the tech, is this leading? And interestingly enough, if you look at RSPT, I'm not sure if this is something a lot of people look at. This is the equal weighted tech sector. So up 1.67%, a very different look. So again, it's the heavy market cap weighted stocks that are kind of dragging the day down. And so I thought that was definitely worth noting. So yeah,
Absolutely.
that's a big thing. And then if we just switch over to S&P 500, as you mentioned, a little bit stronger over there in terms of the close. It was up 0.68%. But here again, RSP doing a big outperformance day. This was up 0.95, almost a full percent. And just where they closed too. I mean, RSP, the closing range here was 79% versus 61% for the S&P 500. So just kind of retained the strength through most of the day, and a very different looking day of strength there.
All right. So for those of you playing along at home on our rally watch here, the S&P is on day 2 of its rally attempt. Meanwhile, the NASDAQ, this was day 4, and we did not get a follow through day today. So we're still waiting for a gain of 1% or greater in volume, heavier than the day before. We've got a Fed meeting coming up that could create, at the very least, some volatility. And we'll have to see what Powell says, and more importantly, how the market reacts. So that would be day, let's see, 5, 6 for the NASDAQ, and then day 4 for the S&P.
Yeah, I think you got it all right there.
Okay.
And one of the reasons, you might say, okay, well, why the discrepancy? The reason is because the NASDAQ came 1 point away from undercutting its lows of Tuesday, and this was on Thursday's action. It came 1 point away from undercutting, but because it didn't, it's still technically a rally that's intact. However, the S&P 500 did undercut slightly on Thursday, and that's why we had to start counting over on Friday. That's the reason for the difference. And remember, again, this is just one kind of thing that we're looking at. It tells us that a potential uptrend or change of trend is starting, but it does not guarantee success. And so we do wait for that that confirmation. And look, we usually like to see some volume behind there. But as you mentioned, the Fed meeting coming up, sometimes people take a wait and see approach, and sometimes you do see the volume kind of trickle off a little bit. But one of the things that we have been seeing lately is that the gains have been coming on lower volume than the down days. There's been a lot of back and forth action. You get some, you'll get one day of strength and then whack, you get, knocked back down. And it does seem like overall the volume has been coming on the down days more than the up days.
Mm-hmm. Good notes there, Justin. Quick look at blue chips here. The Dow last week undercutting 42,000 as well as its lows from December and January, trying to make up some ground and get back above the 200-day line. So it seems like that's the next stop on the upside.
Yeah, and look, this is a kind of important divergence here as well. Whereas the Nasdaq and S&P 500, they really both got knocked down on Monday, but for the most part, they kind of stopped going down, right? You had the S&P 500 go down a little bit more, but they really kind of held most of the lows area. But the Dow Jones Industrial Average and the Russell 2000 both got knocked down significantly more on their Thursday drops. And so, it was not just the Monday, but also the way that it was kind of more persistent selling. It was just down, down, down day after day. And that just looked a little bit different from the NASDAQ that was holding up a little bit better. S&P 500, not as good as the NASDAQ, but still pretty much in there. But the Dow and Russell 2000 looked a little bit weaker to my eye.
Yeah. So speaking of the Russell, nice move here today. The outperformer up 1.2%, but quite the laggard. A lot of damage here in small caps in recent
Yeah,
weeks.
and still couldn't compete with the equal weighted. So again, you take out those mega caps, and it still was kind of your S&P 500 was doing pretty well, but just take out the mega caps.
Mm-hmm. Okay, next on our list, let's take a look at some other ETFs here, Justin. VXUS, excluding the United States here, up 1.3% on the day and breaking out.
Yeah, so this is kind of where things are at. When we talk about that pot of gold really being overseas, international has been seeing a very big move. And, this is the total international. So this is looking at the FTSE global all cap, basically the world. And whether you looked at this or what is the other one we were talking about on IBD Live today? I think it was VEUS. I do have a position in VEUS. Basically the same thing. It's, you know what? I got that wrong. So I'll have to look at my stocks.
Yeah, look it up. You'll get back to us.
It's close to that. But anyway, it's kind of, again, if you look at the global world and then you take out the US, there's a lot more strength there. This is just looking like a better setup overall. So I think that's worth noting. And look, if you go to China, that's an area where there's a little bit more strength. If you go to like KWeb or MCHI.
1 second there. I think it's VEU. Is that the one?
That's I was thinking the XUS, and they just don't have the S. So yeah, VEU. Thank you very much, Allie. Always coming in a pinch. Thank you for that.
No problem. We've got each other's backs. But you were saying China.
Yeah. KWeb and also MCHI are a few ways to play the China right now. I do have a position in KWeb myself. We have KWeb on Swing Trader. We also have VXUS on Swing Trader. So these are two areas where we're kind of getting some of that international exposure, because that does seem to be a lot of where the action is. And look, as I was looking at the IBD 50 today, or even the Growth 250, well, let's take the Growth 250. I just looked at the top 25 stocks in terms of performance today on the Growth 250, and 70% of them were international. Whether it's ASND that was coming from the
Mhm.
Denmark, QFIN coming from China. I think VRNA, I think that was UK, TAL coming from China. You just go down the list. And again, in the top 25 gainers
Mhm.
there,
Yeah.
most of them were overseas, 70%. So I think that, again, tells you where the strength is. And it's not just today. One
Right.
day does not a trend make, but this is something that we've been talking about for a while.
It really is. Okay, one more ETF that we want to touch on before we move on, and
We
that is
have to.
the gold miners,
Yeah.
Justin,
If we're going to be
continuing
talking
to
about
make
our
a
pot of
move.
gold, we got to talk
Yeah.
about the gold miners. GDX, this is another position on Swing Trader. I actually wrote an article on this last Friday. So you can catch that at investors.com. You go into the research tab and you'll find my
Mhm.
article on that called Improving Outcome for Gold Stocks in a Stock Market Correction. So this has been an area of strength. And it's extended now, but the
Yeah.
point of the article was really kind of how you can improve your outcome once you start seeing some gains, whether you're locking in some profits or you are raising your stops. There's a lot of ways that you can kind of improve your worst case scenario in a stock. And so GDX is really showing a lot of strength. If we just go to the weekly real quick, you can see that this has had a nice setup, a nice orderly looking cup with handle, and that relative strength that you're pointing out, the relative strength line, really outperforming the S&P 500 in a big way lately.
Mhm. That it has. And if you look at the monthly here, Justin, it looks like it could be on the verge of breaking out of the last couple of years of action.
Absolutely. And that's something that we've been noting on GLD, to just stick with the gold theme. If you just look at the spot price of gold, this broke out of a, kind of a decade long, cup with handle, if you will, a big long cup with handle, something that Jim Ropel has been talking about with you a lot on your monthly
Yeah.
report with Jim Ropel. So that's something that people should be very well aware of if they've been watching that.
Yeah, but before it broke out, he was calling this the Mona Lisa of monthly cup with handle bases. And boy, when it broke out, look at how that has worked over the last year, Justin.
Yeah,
It's only
it's
had
been a
three
real
down months, and they've been very mild down months.
yeah. So again,
Big win.
not where we're typically looking for
Yeah.
strength, but right now in this market correction, you go you go with what's working.
Yeah, and this extended too, but yep, gold miners, the team has been all over that lately. Okay, well, you mentioned PDD. This is Ireland based, but it does have large presence in China here. Justin, Pinduoduo PDD now up 5% on the day, trying to turn around.
Yeah. So I will say that of the, I went with this because of the Ireland headquarters, but again, this really is China based, and it's kind of on the weaker side of the Chinese companies. But one of the things, if you're looking for things that are recovering and retaking areas that are of importance, retaking that 40-week moving average line, and if you kind of look at an overall downtrend, this is
Mhm.
kind of kind of breaking above a downtrend. And look, this has some strong gains. If we just kind of scroll down to the earnings and sales growth, you can see some triple digit gains here. Yes, it decelerated to 67%, but I mean, hey, 67% is not bad. And those double digit gains on the sales growth side, that's nothing to sneeze at either. So some pretty good numbers there on the fundamental side. And again, it's in that right space. If we look at China, a lot of Chinese stocks have been beaten down, and we're just seeing more and more of these kind of come to the forefront. Now, a lot of people could be, still wary. There's certainly news that can come out at any moment where the government is kind of anti-business at times. Things have been going back and forth. Look, there could be tariffs going on with China. So there's a lot of things and reasons to be cautious. But right now, this is an area that does seem to be getting strength.
Yeah. I'd like to point out that it appears PDD is reporting earnings coming
Very
up
good point.
in a couple of days. So perhaps now this is back on the radar along with the other China individual names, the ETFs. Let's see what the earnings are like. And, if it can continue with the fundamental strength and continue to turn around, maybe it'll form a better looking base at
Yeah.
this point now that it has retaken those areas of interest that you mentioned.
Now, it's probably worth mentioning that if you're going China and you want to go with the strongest stock out there right now, that's probably Alibaba, BABA. We spent a lot of time on this on the show IBD Live this morning. Scott St. Clair. He's been talking about this one for a while. He's really participated in a large move here. And now, if you look at the weekly chart on this, it's kind of got like a little high tight flag action. I do have a position in this, small, albeit small, because I'm just a little bit still gun shy in a correction here, and also with China. But I couldn't resist. I had to get a little piece.
Yeah. So a big move here, powerful breakout. Let's see how this breakout holds.
Mhm.
So that could be very telling there. Okay, let's go to BRKB, Berkshire Hathaway, up 1.6% on the day, has had a couple of strong days here. We've been keeping an eye as it broke out and pulled back, earnings behind us. And we do have that insurance exposure here, Justin, with Berkshire.
Yeah. So it just so happens that our stock of the day today was another insurance company. We seem to be kind of sticking with a lot of these insurance companies today. It was Hartford Insurance Group. So for those that missed it, check out Harrison Miller's stock of the day right up on Hartford. HIG is the ticker symbol there. But Berkshire Hathaway, not only does it have that insurance exposure, but it's diversified in a lot of different areas. And one of the things that was noted as I was reading our SMT article today, Michael Larkin pointing out that the Buffett is making some moves into Japan, or actually I shouldn't say making moves, but kind of increasing his
Yeah,
exposure.
furthering the exposure there.
Exactly. So, in Japan, so this was something that, the new regulatory filings in Japan, Mike Larkin was noting, raised holdings in a number of companies that are trading houses in Japan. So, trading is definitely, there's a big thing about in market volatility. One of
Mhm.
the areas that sometimes you can find a little bit of a safe haven is those trading firms that are kind of getting a little boost from increased
Yeah,
volume,
exactly.
whether it's derivatives trading, hedging strategies, or those that have that global exposure.
Yeah. And while that's a perfect segue to our next stock, I think we just need to tie a bow here in terms of the buying opportunity. Is Berkshire too extended at this point to be viable, Justin?
It is, but this is kind of a reminder that a lot of these companies will give you second chances, because this had a very strong breakout after its last earnings report, and about half of the stocks will do this. They will come back and test the highs or the pivot area, and that's exactly what Berkshire Hathaway did. And I just really like the way it did it. Yes, it got knocked down pretty hard, 2 days, but then it just stopped going down, and you can see the relative strength really came up strong as it did so. So the lesson here is, just because something comes down, look for that support, look for it to stop going down, and especially if that support is at logical areas. In this case, it was the top of the base. Sometimes that will be also the 21-day moving average line. In this case, sometimes that'll be the 50-day. But when you kind of get coinciding areas of support, don't ignore it.
Well said. Okay, let's round things out with a look at Tradeweb markets breaking out of a cup with handled base and scoring an RS line blue dot. This underscores its recent price outperformance versus the S&P 500. A reminder that a blue dot shows up on our market surge charts as a stock is forming the right side of a base or breaking out when you do get a new high for that RS line, which measures price performance versus the S&P 500. So I believe it even had the blue dot last week, Justin, as
Mhm.
it was still setting up, and now with a breakout to kick off the week on Monday.
Yeah, and I do have a position in this one as well. Again, I'm going small right now, but it was another one I couldn't resist. Now, this has also been one that we have had on our subscribers' radar for a while. We did put this on as stock of the day. If you look at February 28th, a really kind of nice day that we had on February 28th, where it was stock of the day. I know it's there somewhere. I promise I saw it.
Clearly, we've been talking about it a lot
Right, exactly.
because we've got
Yeah.
a lot of articles on here.
Yeah,
Or
so there
but
it
yeah,
is.
very
Yeah,
good.
there it is, stock of the day right there, February 28th. But, yeah, if you
Highlight
close
that day.
that, and
Yeah.
if we go back to the chart and show what that day looked like, it was a nice little breakout, from, an area of resistance. Now, it did go up, and look, as this has kind of pulled back, here's another example. It got support right there at its 50-day moving average line, relative strength still going up because this while it was coming down, it wasn't coming down as much. And so that was something that was being noted. I mean, I know you and Ed covered this on an SMT on March 11th. I wrote an article on this on March 7th. So this is something that we have been kind of noting quite a
Yeah.
bit lately. I also did a little bit of research with our sister company, Factiva,
Ooh.
and I was looking at their February earnings, and a few things jumped out at me in terms of what they were talking about in their last earnings report. Volumes driven by higher European ETF volumes. They were
Hmm.
also talking about their growing geographical footprint. So this is not just something that they're going for the US market. They're really kind of seeing that spreading out into other geographies. They were talking about a lot of different, not just European, but also something that they were doing with the Tokyo Stock Exchange, bringing more liquidity to ETFs there. So Tradeweb, while it is a US company, it's getting this larger global footprint that is really kind of helping, especially when international seems to be so important to the market right now.
Absolutely. And one more thing, technically, that I'd like to point out is the area that it's clearing. We often talk about drawing the line. I know David
Yeah,
Ryan talks about this a lot, but today's close, while it is, a little shy of that prior high from back in December, this is the highest close in a number of months here. So breaking out of this long sideways area, RS line at highs. I think that makes today's action even more significant.
absolutely. All good points, Allie. And again, you have my back on a lot of those extra details. Thank you.
All right. Goes both ways. All right. Well, thank you so much, Justin. We appreciate it as always. Thanks again.
Thanks for having me.
And thanks to our audience for tuning in. That is it from us for today, but we will be back with more tomorrow morning on IBD Live, investors.com/IBD Live for all the details on that. We'll see you there. And then we'll also see you right back here tomorrow after the close.